Carl Froch should just keep his big mouth shut. Let's get into this one. Hello, welcome to On Me Ed Son. Hope you're well. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. So, is Saudi Arabia, is it good for boxing, especially for British boxing? Is it good for boxing? Now, if you ask the likes of Carl Froch, he'll say, well, no, it isn't. He's been repeatedly saying it for quite a while now. Now he's facing the backlash from the established promoters, especially those who are embedded with Turki al-Sheikh and the likes from Saudi Arabia, namely Eddie Hearn and, of course, Frank Warren. And they're basically calling him a hater. They're telling him to shut up. Just for the record, I'm not telling Carl Froch to shut up. I'm saying that the promoters and those who have a vested interest in the Saudi Arabia fight cards, they're telling him to shut up. They're saying, no, just wind your neck in, shut up, you're just a hater, you're being dismissive. But is he wrong? Is he wrong to think like this? So let's just dissect this a little bit. First of all, the Saudi Arabia boxing now, it's no different from any other big fight card that was moved to another country in the past. Let's say the United States, Las Vegas, New York, or any other country, right? So just because it's in Saudi Arabia, that's not the issue. The issue here is one of money and finance, and what the knock-on effect is for the rest of the boxing world, and especially other promoters and especially other boxers. Right, so what am I talking about here? When Tyson Fury fought Francis Ngannou in the first rejuvenation of the Saudi cards, it was hailed as being one of the biggest boxing events ever. But in reality, it didn't do very well in the pay-per-views. Or really, I should say, it didn't generate enough pay-per-views to cover the costs of the fighters, the hefty purses they had, obviously the promoters, and just staging the events themselves. Now, I made videos about this in the past, and at the time, other commentators were saying, yeah, listen, Francis Ngannou at the time walked away with about $10 million, and Fury, was it 20, 25, $30 million. What they were saying is that card itself and the pay-per-view sales, it wouldn't generate the interest globally to make it pay for itself. The only reason this fight was on, because Saudi Arabia are backing it. They're bankrolling the whole thing. Now, why are they bankrolling it? Well, yes, they've got an active interest in boxing and hosting sporting events and making Saudi Arabia the center of big sporting action. But it is, and has always been, about trying to focus the global eyes on Saudi Arabia. And it's all about the national interests of Saudi Arabia. This is not necessarily about sporting hosting. This is more about drawing eyes into the country. It's one big PR exercise. It's one big marketing campaign. And they're just throwing money at it. And obviously, if they can get money back from global TV rights deals or pay-per-view sales, all the better, of course. But in terms of them throwing money at it and whether it actually pays for itself, that's a secondary aspect. As long as the eyes of the world are moving towards Saudi Arabia. So from their point of view, it's a win-win. Now, from boxing fans in general, whether you're a casual, whether you're a hardened fan, these fights would never have been made. These fights would probably never been made, and certainly the style of fights and the matchups and the frequency and the speed at which they're being put together would never have been made without this kind of big injection of cash and the desire and will to put these fights on. So from that point of view, from a spectator's point of view, it's great. It's great that we're able to watch these big fights, whether in Saudi Arabia or not. So what's the problem? The problem here is what is left for everyone else, and also what is the expectation for everyone else as well. Now, it could be that other boxers around the world who are not getting onto these big Saudi cards, they want bigger purses as well. Any boxer that has managed to get onto a Saudi card may have overinflated their price. So all of a sudden, they're going to struggle to get fights in the future. Now, we know some boxers, they overinflate themselves anyway. Andy Ruiz being a case in point. He hasn't fought in God knows how long. And by all accounts, he just wants too much money to get in the ring. So why has Carl Froch got to be in his bonnet about this? Well, I think he can see what I can see and many others can see, that in terms of making these kinds of fights or trying to put these fights on in the UK or in the United States, or having some random matchups between fighters, or trying to get anything going in the UK or the United States in terms of big bouts and getting these promoters together, it doesn't make financial sense. It won't make financial sense. And the problem is then you move out of the Saudi Arabia model, and there might be an expectation from boxers, from promoters, and certainly from fight fans and broadcasters that we want to see these big fights. But the problem is it may not make financial sense. Where are we seeing this recently? Okay, so last week, I believe it was, Lee Wood, who was under Matchroom Boxing, he came out on TalkSport and he was saying, listen, I want to fight, I can't fight, nothing's moving, nothing's happening. They want to have that kind of rematch against Josh Warrington. They want that rematch. They want the stadium fight. They want to have it at the City Ground at Nottingham Forest. But that doesn't seem to be happening. But apparently, he hasn't heard from Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing at all. Nobody's speaking to him. Now, at the making of this video, maybe somebody has had a phone call. But at that point, nobody is speaking to anybody for a long time. Then you get a subsequent interview with Eddie Hearn a few days later in a passing comment. We're saying, well, yeah, you know, they want the fight. And you can see what it comes down to. It comes down to that the fighters value themselves at a certain price. They want it staged at a certain venue or a style of venue. And Matchroom Boxing or Eddie Hearn, well, they just can't get the numbers together. They can't make it work. And here's the problem. You want to have big fights, but it always comes back down to promoters against promoters, fighters against fighters, managers against managers, and how much these events are going to cost to put on, how much the fighters want, what income are you going to get either from pay-per-views or just from general ticket sales. And costs are going up, and they're looking at these events, and they're thinking, we can't put on these events. We can't get these big fights, because otherwise the Saudi Arabia influence would say, no, all these boxing promoters, yeah, we can definitely work together now, and we'll be putting on shows every week. It'll be a Friday show, Saturday show, Sunday show every week, and you'll have top bouts every single week. And that's not going to happen because the finances don't work. So Carl Froch is basically identifying what many others are identifying, that the Saudi card, the Saudi influence, the Saudi money, it's an anomaly. It's outside of boxing. And there's probably a real expectation from boxing fans, of course, that we want to see the big fights. Of course we do. But there isn't a business model to allow that. So people want more money. They want to get paid, quite rightly so. But everybody's kind of scratching their heads. Well, outside of the Saudi model, we haven't really got much of a business plan here or a business model to put on world title fights every week or every other week. It just isn't there. So there's a knock-on effect. Not only about taking big British fights or American fights away from the UK or away from Europe or away from America or Mexico or whatever it is and moving them to Saudi Arabia. There is that, of course. But also the knock-on effect of trying to put on big fights and big cards and those being overshadowed by the Saudi Arabia cards. And the purses that boxers will get for fighting in the UK, United States are just going to be so much less compared to those in Saudi Arabia. So there's a big disparity, of course, but there's also going to be a big disparity in the will to put these boxing cards on and also put the big fights on that we want to see. So what does this mean? This means that the only really big fights on a regular basis are going to go to Saudi Arabia if they have the will and the desire to put them on. So the question is, how long are they going to be interested in boxing or putting on these big events? At what point do they turn their attention towards another sport? At what point does Saudi Arabia, the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, what point do they say, yeah, enough with the boxing thing, let's just choose another sport or another activity that is going to generate a lot more interest into Saudi Arabia? So where does this leave the state of boxing? Now, boxing is on a real high now because of Saudi Arabia, and it's a great thing in terms of that respect. But the question will always be, well, what about for the rest? Now, you've heard the likes of Oscar de la Hoya in the United States, other promoters over there as well who are not directly linked with Saudi Arabia. Promoters here as well. They're focused, Boxer, for example, they're putting on great shows here in the UK because there is a bit of a void. Now, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren are really pushing over towards the Saudi Arabia cards. There is a void here. whilst Frank Warner has put the Magnificent Seven on, and Matchroom's still doing their bit as well, not only here in the UK, but the United States and also in Mexico as well. They're taking the show on the road as well. So it's not as if we're not getting boxing fight cards, and certainly we can't watch it on TV. But it's also, again, it's the fallout. What is the fallout? And maybe we're not really seeing that fallout right now. And it could be that the net effect of Saudi Arabia is having an inflationary effect on boxing in general, not only in terms of what the boxers want in terms of purses, but also what the promoters want, and the final cost either at the gate for tickets or on pay-per-views, because there isn't a subsidy for that boxing event. Anywhere else, the boxing cards in Saudi Arabia, they probably just about break even. If not, they'd lose money, especially for the purses they're offering for the top fighters. And you put those cards in the United States, in the UK, for example, there won't be enough money generated for those cards, for those fights. There'll be some big pay-per-views, but again, how much are you paying the fighters? It's all well and good that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren are starting to fire back at the likes of Carl Froch, because they have a vested interest in it. And, you know, if you go against any kind of narrative, any kind of story that's earning money especially, then you are labelled as a detractor, you're labelled as a hater, you're labelled as a complainer, as a whinger, as a whiner. But actually, you're maybe just seeing something that they don't want you to see, or that they don't want you to talk about. Maybe that's what Carl Froch is seeing as well. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And I will catch you again on another video coming very soon. Bye now.